Bringing up nuclear power as a destructive force has a reputation like no other.
The city of Hiroshima lies prostrate after the withering blast which wiped out 53,000 of its population.
But it's going through a rebranding as a clean source of sustainable energy.
Can we rely on nuclear power for a cleaner planet without the risk of catastrophe?
In short, yes.
A new film about the Bible's most influential character is dominating climate conversations. Christ Spiracy's release in global cinemas sees rave reviews.
How would Jesus kill an animal?
And virologists keep a nervous watch over the bird flu, which has spread through poultry and livestock herds to infect a farmer in Texas, only the second known case ever in the US.
If there's a change in the avian flyways, we may see outbreaks in other places.
Just 2 degrees is on now.
If there is reassortment of those two, say an H5N1 virus, then we could have a pandemic virus.
What's the likelihood of that?
For just the second time in the US, a person has contracted the H5N1 virus, also known as bird flu. Authorities are tracking infections in livestock across several states, including Texas and New Mexico. The nation's largest egg producer, Cal-Maine Foods, recently registered a positive test at one of its facilities. In response, the company culled about 1.6 million hens and temporarily ceased operations there. But what exactly is this virus, and what are the risks for humans?
Avian influenza is back in the news. A Texas farmer whose only symptom was red eyes was diagnosed in late March. The infection was discovered just days after dairy cattle in 5 U.S. states tested positive for the virus. But authorities say the risk to most people is low.
I think we have more than enough vaccine in a stockpile to handle individual or small levels of transmission. And in this case, there is no clear need for vaccine at this point because there's no person-to-person transmission.
But it's decimated wild bird populations, and there's a high mortality rate among domestic chickens and turkeys. The country's largest egg distributor is suffering considerable losses, culling 1.6 million hens and hundreds of thousands of young chickens. More than 82 million birds in 48 states have been affected since the start of this outbreak in 2022. And the latest outbreak has scientists concerned.
This is a new development. Cows, mammals, being a reservoir gives this virus new opportunity to change. And that's what we're watching for really closely. Has this virus changed, or is it changing that would make it more likely to spread from human to human?
The H5N1 strain has been around for some time. First detected in southern Chinese waterfowl in 1996, it spread as infected birds shed the virus in their saliva, mucus, and feces. Since then, U.S. researchers say it's spread to nearly 50 mammal species in 26 countries, including humans. From 2003 on, the World Health Organization reports nearly 900 people have been infected worldwide. Some got typical flu symptoms, others developed severe life-threatening pneumonia, with a mortality rate of around 50%. For now, it can only be spread from animals, but whether the risk for humans will stay low is anyone's guess.
Does the spread of H5N1 viruses worry you, particularly since the virus to now seems to have a 50% mortality rate in humans?
So H5N1 does have a high fatality rate in humans, but at the moment, the H5N1 viruses aren't adapted to infecting humans, and they're not well adapted for transmission between humans. They get infections in humans, and they may obviously be fatal, but there's not a lot of infection in humans.
What's the likelihood of changing weather patterns, which of course can affect animal-bird migrations, can contribute to the spread of bird flu?
So the avian influenza is a natural infection of wild birds. And so they're spread globally through the avian flyways, so the migratory flyways of birds. So if climate change or something like that changes those, either the timing of the migrations or the geographic routes of the migrations, we may see avian influenza in places where we haven't seen it before.
Is global warming, you think, giving H5N1 flu viruses more opportunities to better adapt enough to become more dangerous to human beings?
H5N1 has, in particular, been able to infect a large number of species. As we saw in South America last year, a large number of sea mammals were infected with H5N1. There was only one human case. So it's not well adapted to infect humans. However, if you have an animal, say, for example, a pig, so a pig can be infected with human influenzas and also avian influenzas. And so if there is reassortment of those two, say an H5N1 virus that infects a pig and a human influenza virus that's adapted for transmission between humans, and they reassort, then we could have a pandemic virus.
What's the likelihood of that?
Not overly high, but we need to remain vigilant. And so, there's a lot of mechanisms whereby, there's the WHO, there's our sister agencies, FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and the World Organization for Animal Health, that do, regular risk assessments. They're very vigilant. There's a lot of surveillance going on. There's risk assessments that are published, monthly. There's a specific avian influenza site on the World Animal Health Organization site, looking at where outbreaks are.
Does H5N1 have the potential to expand from outbreaks currently across the world into a pandemic?
H5N1, because of its high mortality rate, is probably one of the ones that we're most worried about. So, as an example, it's like the H5N1 clade that infected the sea mammals. That's obviously adapted to mammalian infection. So, a virus, and this is another point, the influenza viruses change all the time. And so that's why we have a new vaccine every season, because their genetic makeup changes. And so, each avian influenza virus has the potential to become a pandemic virus. And so that's why we try to remain vigilant with our surveillance.
Let's talk about nuclear power. Some have described it as the future of sustainable energy. But today, a measly 10% of our electricity is produced from it. But why is this form of energy so unpopular? And why are supporters convinced a nuclear renaissance is needed to secure the future of our planet?
In August 1945, nuclear power's unimaginably destructive force was demonstrated to the world.
The city of Hiroshima lies prostrate after the withering blast which wiped out 53,000 of its population.
Less than a decade later, in an effort to redeem humanity for bringing this dangerous technology into existence, U.S. President Eisenhower advocated using nuclear energy for good. The world was on the precipice of a nuclear renaissance.
In Geneva, this conference of scientists and observers representing 72 countries is a heartening sight for all mankind, for they are gathered to discuss the peaceful uses of atomic energy.
It wasn't long before the world's first commercial nuclear power station was opened in Britain.
First newsreel pictures of the nuclear power reactor now being constructed at Dounreay, Caithness. One advanced type, known as a breeder reactor, because it produces more fuel than it consumes, will be housed in a giant steel sphere to ensure complete safety. Built near the coast, because large quantities of water will be needed for cooling purposes, the station, unlike Harwell, will deal mainly with practical research.
By the end of the 1960s, 78 nuclear reactors were operating across 14 countries. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, they provide clean, pollution-free power without releasing any carbon into the atmosphere. But a handful of devastating accidents have turned the tide of public opinion. The meltdown at Pennsylvania's 3 Mile Island in 1979, the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in modern-day Ukraine in 1986, and Japan's 2011 Fukushima disaster caused by an earthquake and tsunami. Even when they're operating safely, nuclear reactors produce waste that must be treated and disposed of. High-level radioactive waste is extremely toxic and must be safely stored, often for decades before it's safe for disposal. But the American Chemical Society in 2013 calculated that between 1971 and 2009, nuclear energy prevented the deaths of close to 2 million people. That's because it served as a cleaner alternative to other sources of power, like coal. And
even if they've heard that it's very low carbon, which it is, because they've heard back in 2011 that a giant earthquake, one of the largest in the history of recorded history, plus a tsunami, caused plant malfunctions and meltdowns in Japan, I'm glad to be able to say that after that 9.0 earthquake hit Japan, not only were the other nuclear plants unaffected and were not suffering safety issues, but the problems at the nuclear plant at Fukushima Daiichi led to changes and improvements all over the planet, and those lessons will be built into this newest wave of nuclear plants being constructed in the Eastern Mediterranean.
A lot of people have issues with the fact that nuclear produces radioactive waste. Talk about how governments can safely dispose of this.
Radioactive waste is one of the things I hear more people talk to me about now than anywhere else. More than meltdowns, more than the risk of terrorism. It's radioactive waste that people are concerned about. Fortunately, this is the easiest issue in nuclear energy to deal with. All it requires is showing people the way radioactive waste is stored today. Because uranium it's almost magic. You get an enormous amount of energy of a tiny bit of uranium. That uranium is the waste when you're done with it. Now, you can reuse that in more nuclear fuel like France does. You can reprocess it, but you don't have to because the price of natural uranium is low enough that it's not necessary to recycle it and use it again and again. So I think the best thing to do is governments show that you can spend a lot of money to do what Finland does, which is that you take that waste, you put it in containers, you put those containers in other containers, and you put it in deep bedrock and cover it with clay that absorbs water. That's one solution, and Finland's already starting to do that. But it's fairly expensive, and it doesn't save any lives, it doesn't stop any injuries. It's just kind of a psychological thing. So instead, I think that governments need to arrange tours. I've never met somebody who visits nuclear waste, sees how boring it is, how it just sits there in a small canister and is still scared of it. So I think that communication and openness is the cure for nuclear waste fears, because physically it's not a problem.
Meanwhile, an explosive new film is gaining traction in the US and around the world. This latest release by American director Kip Anderson, that's the same guy who directed the Netflix docuseries What the Health, Cowspiracy and Seaspiracy, investigates one of the most influential biblical characters of all time, Jesus Christ, and his possible motive for ransacking a temple market where people bought and sold animals, the so-called Den of Thieves.
Is there any threat or danger making a film like this?
Yeah, you just wait and see. You just wait and see. You have no idea of the far-reaching power of the church. They will stop at nothing to keep this truth from getting known.
Is there a spiritual way to kill an animal? I'll put it this way. How would Jesus kill an animal?
Is there a peaceful way to kill an animal?
I think we need to wrap things up.
What's this thing about animals, guys? What's this thing about eating animals all the time? You want to know about more Buddhist stuff, don't you?
Can I film sometime you killing the sheep with your own bare hands? Can I film that?
Kip Anderson's documentaries have buzzy titles that are difficult to forget. What the Health, Cowspiracy, and Seaspiracy are all movies he co-directed with streaming giant Netflix. They predominantly investigate the destructive role animal farming has had on the environment.
You know, when you're talking about the animal agriculture industry, it's a $1 trillion industry, and it's kind of a scary one, it feels like.
It's not hard to see why his documentaries often make headlines. They've stimulated heated moral and philosophical debates. His latest, Christspiracy, is already following suit. It shines a spotlight on Christianity, more specifically, the role Jesus Christ allegedly played in combating animal agriculture of the time. Kip's supporters say he's inspiring people to change their harmful habits. But there's been a world of backlash too. Some have described him as a vegan propagandist. And Netflix wasn't too comfortable with his latest. The film was meant to be streamed on the platform, but there were disagreements over parts of the film company executives wanted left out. But supporters threw their weight behind the film, fundraising more than $300,000 in less than 2 weeks. Christspiracy debuted in select cinemas across the world on Palm Sunday.
It's a continuation of my previous films, Cowspiracy, What the Hell, Seaspiracy, which focused on the different environmental and health aspects of raising and consuming animals to, build millions and millions. And this one is focusing on the ethics. And I really had zero background in Christianity because my parents did not grow up. We did not go to church, even though my parents were Mormon. We didn't go to church. So it was a real incredible journey to me partnering with my co-director Cam on this journey of discovering these ancient truths that have been hidden up about the historical Jesus and the Nazarene movement that he was part of, that's historically documented. And particularly what you mentioned is the Den of Thieves, this one specific event that happened 4 days before he was crucified. And a lot of people don't realize there's a specific event that led directly to his crucifixion. And it's massive to know what the context was and what just exploring what the motivations were of him doing that led to his crucifixion.
Is there a spiritual way to kill an animal?
I'm going to say I felt a deep discomfort. In the beginning of Christspiracy, you interviewed a priest, I believe, who basically warned you about the path you were taking. Did you feel safe doing this and putting this information in the minds of people, creating some amount of doubt as to what exactly happened?
Yeah, I mean, as far as, well, we feel we're protected. We have to have, I feel to have that belief and feeling that we're protected by doing, we're honoring something that's beautiful, and it's at the root of Christianity and all religions. The film goes into not just Christianity, and at the root and at the core of the message of this film is compassion for all beings, not just humans, but all beings. So we feel that's the intention of it. So we feel with that leading the way, that light is something that protects us. With that being said, there's definitely a lot of conversation that's going to happen from this film, from Christians particular, that explores, or challenges some of the beliefs that they have about how Christianity started and who Jesus was, as far as his relationship with animals. Would he consume or protect animals? Would he kill an animal, protect it? So there's definitely a lot of conversation that will be quite transformative for the Christian movement. But overall, we feel in the long run, it's really, really a beautiful new chapter.
Is this something you want to continue doing?
This is the final chapter of this type of series of it's Cowspiracy of these. Now it's 4 films. From here, I want to do things that this was always supposed to be these films all in one. It took 10 years to make them. So my next chapter, I'm looking to do something that's a little more all-inspiring, a little bit more, I think, taking a break from some of the seriousness of what I've explored. There's definitely more angles to cover in this, but I feel with something I'm looking forward to do is maybe particularly something about a little bit lighter and something that's more inspiring, lack of a better word. With the same thing about, promoting compassion for all beings, but done in a different way, where it's not necessarily calling things out or conspiracies. It's more inspiring by being compassionate to others. So it's exploring that, but really focusing on launching this film for now, of course.
I saw your documentary, Cowspiracy. I also saw Seaspiracy. I remember watching Cowspiracy. After I saw that, I started exploring veganism, um, which is kind of a testament, I think, for how powerful your filmmaking is. What kind of feedback have you gotten so far from people who've seen Christspiracy?
We've gotten phenomenal feedback. What's been so amazing is that we've gotten incredible feedback from not only, well, it could be Christians, could go both ways, but Christians, fundamental Christians, liberal Christians, conservative Christians, across the board. They're really surprised about how much they love it. They're going in with a feeling that, oh, maybe it's going to bash Christianity. And then coming out like, wow, I feel so inspired, closer to Jesus and the movement at the time that makes me closer to my faith. But what's incredible is atheists love the film. Buddhists love the film. Yogis, Hindus. It's really, even the title's Christspiracy, it's just a full spectrum film that there's something for everyone. And there's so much in it, as you saw. It's not just that one thread of Christianity. It really explores all the different angles of our relationship with animals. So it's been incredible to get just amazing feedback. A lot of people say it's the best film that I've been a part of all of them. Quite a lot of people say that. It's one of those, if you love it, you like really, really love it.
When you look at all the dirty energy industries in the world, Kip, where would you rank the meat and dairy industry?
I rank it, well, especially if you've seen Cowspiracy. When you combine Cowspiracy and the domino effect of raising, that's the thing, it's not only killing, but it's raising 70 billion animals and killing them 10 times over the equivalent of the entire human population. Imagine, these animals are only 6 months old, 3 months old, chickens, weeks old, raising really quickly, killing all of them, killing them all. The amount of resources and even oil, like, talking about oil industry, but it takes a lot of oil and fossil fuels, and then the greenhouse gases and the land use, and then the bykill of all the wildlife that we show in both films, and then the ethical core moral fabric of who we are as humane beings, what that does to us, and finding out that the origins of war started from animal agriculture and this domino effect. So if you look historically over the last 2,000 years, I don't think there's something that's had more of an effect on us as human beings and where we're at today as raising and killing animals for food. I would say that's by far number one, more than, I guess most people would say, the oil industry. When you look at, again, while I look at Cowspiracy, there's just no comparison.
Would you describe Jesus Christ as the original animal rights activist?
Well, you could say that, especially to the extent that he did of what, if you believe of what happened at the temple, and what his brother did, James, after he passed. It's more of the movement, these were. But I would say, going back further, you have Buddha. There's stories of Buddha being very against animal sacrifice when the Hindu Brahmins were killing animals for sacrifice, and he said, "I will sacrifice my own life instead." So something very similar to Jesus. But then but at that time too, there was Pythagoras, who before the word vegetarianism was even a word, used to be called a Pythagorean, which is very interesting. So you had these animal activists, compassion activists, I like to call them, that was even before Jesus's time. But yes, I definitely feel he was an activist for animals. And people forget that humans are animals. So when we say he's an animal activist, humans are one of them. He's an activist for humans as well, but I believe all beings.
The Animal Save Network is an international organization whose origins in 2010 were all about ending the slaughter of pigs in Canada. The organization is a supporter of Kip's film, and members conducted banner drops across the US and Europe in an effort to get as many people as possible to see it.
I would love to get your initial reaction to this Christspiracy film.
Well, my initial reaction, I feel like my head popped when I was watching this film. There were so many revelations. I'm not a religious person. I was raised in a religious household somewhat, but as an adult, I'm not a religious person. But this film made me feel so much positivity towards Christianity, and Jesus. I mean, it's a very positive film. So I just want everyone to know how positive it is, and you know, how wonderfully it speaks about Jesus.
Talk about your perspective looking at the film as a vegan.
I guess there was quite a bit of validation there. I don't want to give anything away to your audience, but there was quite a bit of validation there. You know, just wanting to spread peace to other animals, and you know, and have everybody do that. That is, you know, the universal message of most religions, is to spread peace, you know, to all living beings.
And it's only appropriate we end the show on these large but fragile animals. There are less than 350 North Atlantic right whales left in the world. They die when they get entangled in fishing gear or when ships unwittingly hit them. Also, warming ocean waters affect zooplankton, the whale's primary food source.